Hey there, everyone. Welcome back to another live with me, Ben Rogshawn. I'm a little bit late. I meant to do this at 9:20, but we'll start when we start. Just had some meetings run late. But hey there, everyone. Today, I really wanted to open up the floor to you guys to just ask questions, really around like for people who are interested in thinking about starting consulting, and just answering questions in that specific space. I know there's a lot of people that have reached out to me in the last few weeks, and they've asked, is consulting something I should do? Is it the right place I should spend my time? And so, really, I wanted to open up the floor and give people that opportunity to answer that question. I think consulting is definitely not something that everyone wants to do, or maybe you think you're going to want to do it, and then you're going to run into various problems. Whether that's actually, let me turn on my light really fast. I just realized, I'm like, why am I? There we go. A little too bright, but that's as low as it goes. There's a lot of reasons why people might prefer consulting. There's a lot of reasons why people might not. I think the biggest thing is that it can feel a little uncertain if you don't have a method of gaining clients or finding clients. That's the biggest problem I see most people running into. Is like, where do I land clients? Who are my clients? How do I keep a consistent flow? For me, my general answer is like, well, it's easy to put out content. And if you can put out unique content, that's a great place to start. But everyone I've talked to has a different method when it comes to landing clients, right? Some people use networking. They're really good at just connecting with either people they've worked with in the past or connecting at events like meetups, while other people are really good at creating, like, using networks and having like networks of consultants. So maybe you're a Salesforce consultant and you connect with someone that is a data consultant, and you work together to get clients that support your needs. But again, feel free to ask questions. The real goal for this is me to answer your questions. Again, should you start consulting? I think it's the first one most people ask. After that is, how do you get clients? There's always questions about pricing, but I've really been trying to help people answer some of these things. And even if it's not consulting, I think there's a lot of stuff in the data world that people are always curious about. While we're kind of waiting for any questions to kind of come up, I can kind of go through at least. Let me see. I will at least put up an article and we can read through it while people think of questions. So if anyone doesn't know, I do put out another article or another newsletter that's mostly around consulting. Naming is not my strong suit, so I've renamed it to the Technical Freelancer Academy, but originally named it D-Cubed for various reasons. But I thought it was clever in my head, but I don't think it was as good as it could have been. So in this article I did recently write, I kind of covered some of the lessons I've learned over the last few years. Maybe it'll kind of prompt some questions. The first kind of obvious lesson, I think, is being technical is not enough, right? Yes, you need to have a baseline of skill at the end of the day, regardless, in terms of like technical skill, because you're doing, whether it's data architecture, front end engineering, back end engineering, you're providing a technical skill. So you do need to be technical. But on top of that, in order to really take it to that next level, you have to be comfortable in some level of promotion, because you're either going to be selling or doing marketing, or somehow presenting yourself and the value that you add to clients. And that's not necessarily you talking about how you set up your Snowflake database, or how you think Databricks is better than Snowflake, or topics that might not actually sell a client because they don't sell the outcomes that the clients care about. I kind of think I wrote about this below. I reference that this might seem obvious, but I often just see that businesses and other consultants kind of make this mistake continuously. They assume just making a good enough product or being a top talent will automatically get them clients and or customers. And the truth is, it won't, right? It's the whole adage of, if a tree falls in the forest and no one's around, does it make a sound, right? You do need to consider the fact that you need to make some level of noise to say, like, hey, this is who I am. This is what I do. This is the value I think that I can add to your business and your clients. Uh, because if they don't know, then they're gonna have a hard time. Um, I use a reference to Palantir because Palantir, I think, had a point where they really didn't want to have something in terms of a sales team, and then slowly they realized that yeah, some level of selling is required, because it's just really hard to get people on the same page, even if your product is the best. Um, or even if you're the top talent. So I think it's a big important factor for everyone to understand. It's like you can be the best talent, but people don't know that. You have to show them somehow that you are the best talent. And the best thing to do is generally to, as I said, show them and not just tell them. I think I saw a few questions lining up. Uh, ah, so first question. Hi, Ben. What are the reasons, circumstances customers opt for consultants rather than hiring? There's actually a lot of benefits to having a consultant. The first being that you generally are looking for someone that's done whatever the job is multiple times, right? Uh, Maybe a specific type of migration, maybe some sort of high risk project. They've likely seen multiple iterations of this project. And so they can provide advice about the gotchas and see around corners. Right? At this point, I've set up dozens of data stacks. So if someone's like, "Hey, we're trying to figure out what tools to use," I can pretty quickly assume and provide advice on like, "Hey, here's my thinking on these solutions. Here's how I think you should use them." I often even just do that in a 30-minute call. And then even the implementation is important. Another thing is like consultants and contractors are easy to get rid of, right? I mean, in some degree, so are employees, sadly, but there's no need to think about severance. There's no need to think about all these layers. So you can easily, if a project no longer makes sense, or if your company no longer has the money to do a certain project, you can say, "Hey, we're done," and the project is over. And so that's kind of nice for companies as well. You also don't have to pay them benefits. Generally, consultants charge more. And you should, if you're out there as a consultant, you have to consider the fact that you have benefits. You also, in theory, should have overhead. Even if you just do work at your own house, you have overhead if you ever want to like expand your projects. So it's really important to consider all this. So yeah, usually you're hired because you have a specific experience in an area. You are, easily expendable. Also, generally, I'm trying to think what was the other. I have a whole list somewhere of like the reasons. Those are the big ones I usually think of, but there's a whole list I have. There's also some level of staff augmentation, but then the argument is that a consultant if you're just staff augmentation. So, but that's also a benefit. Let's see. Hi, would you please share some tips on having a full-time job and data consulting freelancing on the side? Sure. Yeah. So when I started at Facebook, I mean, I started consulting far before working at Facebook. But at Facebook, that was the first time I ever looked at the contract and saw a moonlighting clause. And so the first thing I did, since I had a client going into Facebook, was like just say, "Hey, my manager, his name was Justin." I was like, "Justin, can you, you know, I just want to let you know that I have a client. Is that okay? Do you know if Facebook has a policy?" And so through that, I found that Facebook did have a policy that let you kind of do both. You weren't allowed to like say, "Hey, client, I work for Facebook, so hire me." So I was never allowed to sell myself as a Facebook engineer or Facebook data engineer. I could only obviously sell myself as myself. So that was like one of the limitations. I do assume some companies are a little stricter maybe now, but I think if you're just doing general consulting work, uh, I think most should be fine as long as you're not competing directly. Obviously, like you need to be very careful. I had at one point LinkedIn reach out to me and off like we were a few calls in to me possibly uh, consulting with them, but then I don't know why I didn't think about it. Where I was like, oh, of course I can't do consulting with LinkedIn. It's too similar to Facebook, and I don't have to deal with the possible like getting someone to review this whole project from internally at Facebook, or yeah, from internally at Facebook. I think the hard thing then is time. So when do you have time to do it? I think there is plenty of time if you are more than likely single and don't have a family, right? Like honestly, that is a big blocker for most people, right? Like if you have a family, if you have partner, you either one, if you're just married but you don't have kids, you can probably have a conversation saying like, "Hey, I'd love to do consulting. Can you, can for the next 3 to 6 months, can I test it out and see how we act, like how we can interact in that world." But it's much harder, obviously, if you have a family. I think Alex Friedberg from Alex the Analyst, uh, has a good example of like having a family and then like still managing to do consulting and working full time, and putting out YouTube content. So I think he's always a great role model there for like having a family too. Like that's a really hard thing to juggle. Hopefully that mostly answers your question. I'm going to go to the next one. Hey, Benjamin, really appreciate this. How did you make the jump from executing all work yourself to your clients accepting work supervised by you, but executed by one of your employees or subcontractors? Honestly, I still do a lot of the work. I like doing the work. I do occasionally subcontract out. I try to find work that is generally um, maybe up the food chain, so a little more higher value, more principal work. But I still do the work, or I'll sometimes just find. I've got some people that I trust. That I think the biggest thing is you want to find people that you can communicate with that understand what you're saying, um, and can deliver based on what you've asked them to. So part of that is you need to learn how to ask people, and how to define a task for people who maybe don't have as much experience. And then the other part is like finding people who are good enough that you don't have to constantly check their work. I think that's always the challenge. I think that's what a lot of consulting companies do well is they find really, you know, talent that is good enough that will always figure out the problem themselves, and they don't have to constantly be monitored because that's what's really going to be difficult, especially early on. Is um, if you don't have talent that can at least be somewhat independent, you're going to have a hard time. How do you get a client to ensure cash flow? I assume for the first few months as a data consultant. Um, My guess is you're probably thinking like, how do I find clients? I think uh, generally one, just to make sure this is maybe the first part of your question, which is I always ask for a down payment before I start doing work. I don't do work unless I get usually like either half a month upfront, because of the fact that yeah, you usually have like this 30-day term after that. So you'll finish your first, the next half of that month, and then you'll have to wait 30 days after that to just get paid. So that's why I always ask for a down payment. Otherwise, there could be 60 days between me doing work and then getting paid. So always ask for down payment. Sometimes it's half of the first month. Sometimes it's just the first full month, depending on how big the project is, because I want to make sure, one, that I can trust getting paid, and two, that they have some skin in the game too, right? Like I don't want to put in 60 days of work and then realize you're not going to pay me. So I think it's always worth to do that. The other part of that question, at least that I'm reading, is like, how do you find clients? Because you have to keep clients coming in. And generally, you have to find your method. I usually call it like a superpower of how you land clients, right? Is it marketing? Is it sales? Is it that you have a really good partner that does the sales? But someone has to be really good at getting you in front of clients. That's my biggest recommendation is you got to find a way that you can be good at that. I have created a community where we talk about some of this stuff like marketing and sales. So if you check out, I think I just posted about like the TFA community. You can join that and people talk about some of those problems. As an individual consultant around data, are you essentially the whole data department CDO, or do you team up with other consultants to fill the roster for engineering, analytics, etc.? Yeah, so every once in a while, I definitely do fill out the roster, so to speak. Right, like I'll tell most clients, like, can I do some data science work? Sure, but more like your basic analytics, your basic statistics, kind of stuff. If you need someone who's like a genuine, like to do deep research in a project, like I would bring someone on to do that. Same thing with machine learning, right? It's really going to depend on what you need. So yeah, there are certain things. Oh, and same thing with dashboards. Like I can build you a good generic dashboard. It'll follow good principles. But if you want something that just like is super shiny, that has all the polish on it, like I'd hire someone that does that. So yeah, I think I try to find the right people based on their skill sets. Again, actually, another shout out to the TFA community. That's one reason I built the TFA community. I'm really trying to build this like group of people that like if you need a front end engineer, if you need a data engineer, if you need something like that, you can go to it and then hopefully find someone that could help you on that project. How do you first set up clients, or how to get the first set of clients to stay afloat as a new data engineering consultant? So yeah, kind of like I referenced earlier, in terms of marketing or sales, you have to figure out the way that's best for you. What I have learned when I've talked to most consultants is their first clients generally come from networking, right? It's someone that they knew, and or maybe two or three people that they knew, and that's how they've really started things to go. That way they've got things like case studies that they can market and kind of go from there. Again, if you don't have that, you're really gonna have to figure out marketing. And if you don't have marketing, you have to figure out sales. If you don't have sales, you just have to kind of keep going down the list of how to land clients. Hey, Benjamin, I'm a data scientist who never had any experience building software products. So, if I have to get into independent consulting, would offering a solution for a client's problem suffice? Should I necessarily build around it? I think most likely what you're asking is, do you need to build products as a data science consultant? You don't necessarily need to, right? If you have a specific area you're really good at in data science, like maybe you are great at fraud detection or really good at recommendation systems, uh, then more than likely you can try to specifically target a few of those areas that people still are trying to build today, right? You do have to figure out if there's a need in the market, and the best way to do that is go talk to a bunch of people that you'd want to be your clients, figure out what their needs are as a data scientist, or from a data scientist or a data scientist consultant, and figure out where you align, and then you can start marketing there and targeting those problems. But you don't need to develop a software product per se. You just need to be able to deliver. Let's see. I'm going to skip one just because there's been a few questions from this one person. Hey, Ben, what would you consider the better medium and platform to start building a presence and eventually landing consulting gigs? I will tell most people, first build your own website. Like, just having a website is still good. I still see people have this need for SEO. Like, I've helped people and coached people to writing articles that have gotten them placed first on Google, not because I'm an SEO expert by any means. Honestly, just because I noticed a gap in uh, knowledge. So I think you should always build your own site first, because then if you decide to use something like LinkedIn or Substack, it should always point back to your website. Because at the end of the day, you want people to be clear that they know that you are a consultant and you can offer skills. Honestly, I've gotten most of my clients probably from my website, more than probably from LinkedIn, but LinkedIn kind of helps drive people to my website. And then from there, hopefully they come and consider me to be a consultant. So I think it's really important to have your website first, and then from there, maybe you pick LinkedIn. Maybe if you want to take a challenge, build on YouTube. There's not a lot of people on YouTube, but it's hard to stand out at the same time because you're competing against Mr. Beast and all these great content creators. But I think LinkedIn's always a good second place. So hopefully that answers your question, but let me know. Let's see. Thanks, Ben. What are viable business models that consultants can offer? Hourly or project based are the most common, but what about offering proprietary usage of a subscription based pipeline? Yeah, so obviously, like you said, hourly and project based are good. If you have some unique technology, I can see this being helpful, right? Like DBT kind of did this to a degree. I don't know if they charged a subscription afterwards, but they had a tool, and then eventually got a pay version of it because it was open source. So I don't know if they charged eventually. I have seen people do what I think are dirty things as a consultant, which is, and I don't think this is what you mean. I hope it's not what you mean, where they built the entire data infrastructure on their AWS cloud. So the consultant built the entire AWS data infrastructure on their cloud, and then started charging the client in order to use it. So they, one, charged to build it, and then two, charged to continue using it, which I think is completely unethical. Right? You should always build on the client's infrastructure, unless for some reason unless it's clearly dictated in the contract, like, hey, we'll build it and the client wants you to maintain it. Then, hey, obviously that's fine. But personally, that just seems a little bit rent-seeking behavior to build infrastructure and then charge the client to essentially use it and say oh, well, we've put in proprietary knowledge. It's no, you're a consultant, you're paid to build it. And in fact, most contracts state that everything you build, and if this must have just been one of those cases where it didn't say this, where everything you build for the client is the client's, right? And that should just be the way it operates. All right, what tends to be the sweet spot for client size in terms of their employees' revenue? The assumed trade-off being between clients who are the greatest data needs, smaller versus the ability to pay big. Well, big clients have tons of data needs, right? There's generally a big gap, and they have big data problems. What I'd say is, first of all, the difference. So if you work for a startup or even a smaller company, what's nice is you will get you'll go from not like they'll just reach out to you and be like, "We want help," and sign a contract within like a week or 3 weeks. It'll be very fast. If you work for with a big company, I have multiple times. It's almost always taken at least 8 months or more, right? Because it's got to go through procurement. It's got to go through. They're going to have like legal look at your contract if you're the person that gives the contract, or they'll give you a contract and you need to look through 100 pages of legal documentation. Which you should get a lawyer for, and it takes a really long time. But what's usually nice and what's a trade-off there is that you probably now have a project for the next year or so. So on one side, right, small companies, generally your projects are probably like 3 months, 6 months, and could end at any time, and they generally don't pay as well. Or you could get these large contracts that pay a little better, but just require a lot more patience to get. And then the mid-size is kind of a little bit in between and I've worked all up and down the spectrum. Mid-size tends to be sometimes they have procurement, sometimes they don't. Like it really just depends on how the company is and how mature it is. Um, but let's see what tends to be the sweet spot. I mean, I like at least mid-size because they've got a decent amount. Obviously, there's some stability there. They're willing to pay. Um, you know, they've got a good amount of employees, which means they've got problems that are beyond just hey, set up this data infrastructure. You can be more of a pure consultant as well as maybe doing some implementation. So you can be like, hey, here's some processes. I think you should set up. Here's some people. I think you should hire after me to kind of continue working on this. So I like that space, and there's tons of mid-sized companies that people probably have no idea exist and have all these data problems, right? Like there's all these random companies that you don't realize make countries go around, make make businesses go around, and they have money and they need help, and yeah, I think mid-size is always nice. Someone just asked, "Hey Ben, how are you?" I'm good, good. Thank you for asking. If no one has any more questions, I'll keep kind of at least going through these points. So I was talking about earlier being technical enough is not enough. Next point is charging by the hour. You will hit a wall. So when you first start consulting, I'm actually like a lot of people will tell you, hey, you have to be a value based consultant and charge by value. And I totally get that feeling. What's nice about being technical is you can charge a decent amount per hour and make a decent living, but you do hit a wall. But the point is, you usually don't know what to charge for, right? You're like, what is something worth? And you don't really know, what people value. Why are people willing to pay you? And that comes through time. So that's why I generally say, first when you first start consulting, focus on trying to figure out who your clients are, how to land them. Once you figure that out, really focus on, you know, how you deliver, figuring and learn how like what people value, what part of what part of what you're delivering is most valuable. And then you can start thinking about pricing and playing around with that, figuring out, okay, how do I price to make sure that, I optimize, that I clearly give them all the value that they're asking for and I'm getting paid for all of it, right? Because we generally don't get paid for the value of work, we get paid for hours. Um, and you just hit a wall where like people aren't going to pay you more than a certain amount per hour. And the only way to capture that value is to consider doing value-based projects, essentially. Which I don't think I don't have a thing here for it. Oh, but here's a few things to consider in terms of like what go into value besides just doing the work. Which is, hey, if you do the project faster, that's valuable. If you have certain expertise in an area, that's valuable. Your quality, that's valuable. Your ability to reduce risk, that's all valuable. And then obviously tangible outcomes. I also didn't even include the fact that you're expendable. You can be done with that project at any time. And there's a whole bunch of other layers to it as well. And again, people, you can feel free to keep asking questions. Um, this is one area that I always struggle with, which is focus on one thing and make it better. Uh, I like this picture because it really does cover the fact that a lot of us feel like we need more time. Oftentimes, we just need to be more focused on what we're trying to do. Right now, I'm trying to focus on two areas, which probably still one too many, but my focus is on really helping clients on a higher level. Like I'm still doing implementations, but really trying to figure out how do I really act as this like fractional either head of data or kind of person that's coming in to help do more than just implement. And then the other side is helping consultants. And so I've got the TFA community, I've got little things, I've been putting out more content in this space. And those are the two areas I'm trying to focus on and not trying to add more. But yeah, the more you can focus on those, the better. Because you really sometimes, I think you can only get one or two things that are really big done in a day. And if you can just focus on those for, a good amount of time, whether it's 4 hours or 8 hours, whether it's marketing or how you're hiring or how you're doing sales, that will get you there, right? Like I referenced earlier, a lot of people think that they need to, worry about the entire stack in terms of like, I need to work on marketing, I need to work on my pricing, I need to work on my products. Honestly, if you just focus on one of those areas for a good amount of time and just really hone it in and make it perfect and then go to the next one, you'll probably get farther than if you try to focus on all like 5 areas. So when you first start out, you're really focusing on how you get clients, whether that's marketing, whether that's sales, whatever it might be. You need to just put all your time and energy, or at least whatever is your like focus time, in that. So when you're first starting consulting, you probably need to spend a ton of time either marketing or doing sales or networking, and pick one and do it really well, right? If you're doing networking, reach out to as many people as you can in 4 hours, or do things that will get people to reach out to you in a 4-hour period. And just do that really heavily in the first go. And then, if you're focusing on sales, then focus on sales. If you're focusing on marketing, focus on putting out, I think I said here is like, just put out, like if you're doing LinkedIn, put out a ton of LinkedIn posts, 1 or 2 a day at least, if not more, and constantly focus on making them better. So figure out what your top 20% of content is, and then only do that, look at that 20% and try to remake that 20%, and then just keep doing that until you get better and better and better. And do that for a few months, and it'll just eventually be a skill that you can do without thinking. So that's really the way I think about it, is like, if you focus on one thing, you can make it a lot better. 4, information is cheap, execution is everything, right? Even in this world of like where it feels like ChatGPT will take away a lot, information has for a long time been cheap. Now we are, I think, going to make it easier to find good information, which I think is great. But at the same time, it's going to be about your ability to execute for the client and your ability to be consistent for the client. So deliver good work consistently is far more valuable than just giving out information. I like this quote from Kent Beck where, he finally used ChatGPT and basically found that the value of his skills, for some skills, 90%, just dropped to $0, but their leverage for the remaining 10% went up by 1,000x. Because at the end of the day, we still need to execute. We still need to like actually do things. And the reason I think that I kind of have here is like execution takes discipline. You have to keep doing the same thing over and over again. It takes some nuance. It takes, getting human buy-in. There's just so much that goes into consulting that is not just, it's not just knowing the right thing. It's like doing it, executing it, knowing all the gotchas. That really will get you far. And again, feel free to ask questions. There's still plenty more I'd be happy to answer. Next, don't chase money, chase problems. I mean, we all need to get paid. I think this is always hard because at the end of the day, we need to get paid. We need to figure out how we're going to get paid, whether it's your job or not. But if your only goal is to chase money, you'll probably find some. The thing is, if you want to make a lot of money, the goal is to really try to find problems that people have, right? Find problems and solve them, and people will reach out to you. If you're one thing I like to say, if you're stuck and you don't know what problems to solve, go set up a ton of calls with people that you think should be your customers. And I don't mean 5. I mean, try to set up a ton, 20, 50, and just keep talking to them, figure out what their problems are. See if there's some sort of through line. 1, it's great for networking, right? You're not trying to sell to them. You're just trying to understand their problems. But 2, you're learning from them. You're learning what their problems are. And honestly, it's going to be hard to get 20 or 50 people to respond because most people don't want to have this conversation or are busy. So you're going to have to figure out how to give them value at the same time. Also spend some time just reflecting on what you've solved in the end or in the past. I do this a lot where I'm like, okay, what do I really do right now? What have I done in the last year or 2? What are the problems that I've really solved that I really like fixing or solving, and things like that. Also, you can just go out and help people on LinkedIn or a user group or Slack channel. I see people land clients on things like DT's Slack because they'll answer questions, and eventually people are like, hey, I want to bring this person on because they understand how to solve this problem. So I think it's really important to figure out what problems you're going to solve, because that's going to be where money is going to come from, not just chasing the money and hoping for it and getting rich in Excel, as I once heard someone say, right? Like that, people like to get rich in Excel. They like to sit there and say, like, if I make $1,000 a day and, whatever, do the math, and I'm going to make this much a year, right? Like, that's not how you get rich. You do it by solving people's problems. If your expertise is more downstream, i.e. analytics versus building data infra pipelines, do you recommend learning engineering skills to be more of a generalist? I think you can totally be some sort of like dashboard or BI consultant. There's tons of them. In fact, I think Power BI consultants do a really good job because of the fact that your skill set is very visual and very tangible. Data engineering, you build tables that people don't really see the value in, like, unless they build on top of it, right? In fact, most of my projects, I will include some sort of dashboard or end product, because otherwise it's really hard for people to see what I did. So I think it's really important to have some sort of end product like that. So I think, no, you don't need to. You don't have to. You can be a really, really good analytics or BI type person. And in fact, if you do that plus learn what business cares about, I think there's a lot more value there, right? Like, hey, I can not only create this dashboard, I know which dashboards you should create. I know how you should respond to certain metrics. Like, I'd actually go the opposite way and become really good at understanding a specific niche like healthcare, like marketing, and how those metrics matter and why they matter and how to talk to the business about them, because that will be that will give you a lot more high level value. So, and then you can just partner with someone that is engineering focused. What are some common gotchas you face in the consulting space? If you mean more as consultant versus specifically like doing the work, right? Because like doing the work, the gotchas tend to be, people want to use all the fancy tools when they honestly just need like one basic tool, or maybe they don't realize that their data is behind a firewall, and that's going to take time if they don't spend time figuring out how to bring it down and talk to engineering and be like, hey, can we pull this data from your system? In the consulting side, usually the gotchas that I'd say are, one, and this is more of your own gotchas that you have to fight. One, it's really common that you start negotiating with yourself before anyone negotiates with you. So like, you're like, I really want this client to say yes. And it's really hard if you've like maybe set a price that you feel is too high. For whatever reason, you feel like it's too high. Like, oh man, I feel like this price is too high. So you start negotiating before you even have a conversation with the client, because you want them to say yes. And so you're like, well, maybe instead of $225 an hour, I'll charge them $180. They don't seem like they could afford it, right? Like, you start doing this game, and the truth is, you don't want to be like, if you've set a number, you should probably try to hit that number. If you're doing hourly or if you're doing a certain cost for a project. Obviously, if you're not getting a lot of yeses, then you can reconsider pricing. But I like to say, like, with pricing, pick a price that you're trying to hit and try to sell that number. If you have 4 or 5 calls and they all are no's, maybe you can now consider repricing, but don't do it on the call. And then on the flip side, if you get all of them to say yes, now you increase your price. And that's generally how people think. So that's one kind of gotcha. Another one is make sure you get a down payment. I have on one occasion not been paid because the client, like, it's weird. The client was around for a year, or they were around a lot longer than a year, but I worked with them for a year. They were always paying me. And then they missed one payment, and I was like, okay, well, I'll just, let it go. They've always paid. And eventually it just, it turned out I didn't get paid. They went bankrupt a little bit after that. So be very strict about that. Like, if someone doesn't pay you, you stop working. The job of a client is to pay you. Your job is to do the work. If they don't do their job, you don't have to do your job, is the way I view it. Hi, Benjamin. Looks like you built your website on WordPress with Elementor. Any advice creating a personal website? Any priority in these Substack, blogging, LinkedIn, Yoast, Google Analytics, etc.? Yeah, definitely first build a website. Honestly, I think I've now built Wix, whether it's WordPress. I like WordPress, I guess, a little bit more than Wix in terms of how I interact with it. I'm not a big fan of my hosting platform that I've picked, but it's a pain to switch. So I'll probably switch at some point, but it's a pain. I'd first build a website, start blogging, use LinkedIn. What I like using LinkedIn for is like testing out ideas, right? Like, hey, how do I test out is it worth writing a 2,000 word article on a certain topic? Well, you can test out an idea on LinkedIn that's 500 words or 300 words and see how people respond. So I like blogging first and then maybe testing out ideas on LinkedIn. And then from there, if you want Substack, that's great. You can gather emails and then go from there. I don't actually even really use Google Analytics that much because I just I have a pretty good idea where people land clients from. So I actually don't need it. Let's see. Yeah. How do you deal with a client who's going bankrupt? Well, you try to get paid. And if you don't, that's you should hopefully know soon. Usually clients will try to tell you, try. Otherwise you shouldn't be working with them. Again, if they miss payments, just don't work because you have other things to be doing. Is being multi-cloud a normal client expectation? How normal is it to be familiar with part of a client's stack? How can we minimize this problem? So yeah, like generally there is this expectation that you have at least some background in most technologies. I think it's totally okay to be like really good at certain tools, right? Like, and just being honest with that. I think there's some expectation that you will get up to speed quickly. I think that's part of being a consultant is like you need to get up to speed quickly. But do you realize that if they find someone that has all the skills, like and solid skills, like I think that's the thing. It's like some people say they have all these skills. Like if they clearly show and demonstrate their ability, it'll be hard to compete. But as long as you're really good at, let's say AWS, and this person's multi-cloud, they'll probably be happy to work with you still. So I wouldn't be too stressed on that matter. Just make sure you're really good at a few areas and you can at least talk on the other areas, right? You're very deep in maybe AWS. And then you can talk on Azure and your feelings there. So that's my feelings. Hi, Ben. Could you please share more insights on getting the first set of clients when we are still in the early stages of moving towards consulting roles? Apologies in case you had answered this question earlier as I joined a bit late. Yeah, I mean, just quick recap, right? You have to find some superpower. Most people, when they first start, use their network. If they don't use their network, another place you can kind of start, depending on where you live. I don't really think it's great for the US, but I understand externally. Is somewhere like Upwork. I don't think you should rely on Upwork too long. It can become a crutch where you just lose out on the ability to make more money because it's kind of a race to the bottom. But after that, you have to figure out something like marketing, sales. Maybe you're a vendor partner, like you partner with Snowflake, Databricks, and that's really going to be your focus eventually. So you have to figure out what you're going to do. Whether it's again marketing, sales, networking, vendor partnerships. I have a whole list somewhere that I'm now trying to remember where I put it. Probably on an old video where I talk through all the ways, but that's a good way to think about it. Oh, actually, I do have a video that I haven't put out yet that's going to talk about this soon. So probably put out next week. Does it make sense to learn more niche technologies like Mage AI or Prefect, seeing as there are almost no jobs explicitly looking for people with these skills? I mean, they can be worth to dig into. I don't know if I'd say I'd become like a quote unquote prefect engineer. Like I think being a general data engineer that maybe likes prefect makes sense. So talk about data engineering. So if you talk about like your marketing strategy, maybe you talk about data engineering, and then maybe you talk a little bit about prefect and Mage. And what you've learned from them and why you think we should use them instead of Airflow, right? Like that's a very good article right there, just alternatives for Airflow. And you talk through things like Prefect and Mage and why you think they're good, why you think they're bad, where you think they fit. And that can kind of meet people where they're at because there are people who are going to be looking for some of these popular solutions and looking for alternatives to the popular solutions. And you want to have content there that meets them where they're at. So I do that instead of trying to be really, really, really niche in technology. I'd be really niche on solving business problems. I think that's a good thing. You can be very focused on business problems. I would not be very focused on a very niche technology. If you're going to focus on technology, be broader like Snowflake or Databricks, because there's a lot of work there. Whereas it's hard to know if there's a lot of work in Major or Prefect right now. All right. Those are the questions so far. So just kind of re-going through these points here. So the next point I had was get Unblocked Fast. So I think one of the habits that I've noticed with some FTEs is that they'll kind of wait until a PM unblocks them, right? Like a PM tells them, "Hey, did you send an email to John or Janice about finishing a task?" And they kind of have to be the ones that unblock you and move things along. I think as a consultant, you kind of need to get unblocked fast, right? Um, I've had situations where people like I've had to predict the fact that I'll get blocked, where like someone was going on vacation and I had to know that they're going to go on vacation and I had to like make sure that they got work done before they left because otherwise, the whole project would be delayed by weeks. And so I think there's this aspect of making sure you get unblocked fast. If something isn't working, make sure it's quickly brought up to the right channels. Always have a POC that you can reach out to, you can quickly go to and say, "Hey, I'm blocked. Can you help me get unblocked here?" So I think that's definitely worth digging into as well. Uh, Next, quality is better than hacks. So especially in marketing, right? Like everyone's got interesting like hacks that they have, and they're like, "Oh, you have to post at this time, or you have to write X amount of hashtags. Your first sentence should be so many sentences long." And the thing you'll find out is that if you put out really good content, um, it's not going to matter, right? Like if you put out really good content, people will find it, people will read it, people want to be part of it, and they'll want to share it. And I found that over and over again is that if you put out really good content, people want to connect with it. So always consider that quality is better than hacks. I feel like this is only 7. Sorry if I'm making one Disney. Oh, it was 8 years, 7 lessons. It's like I thought, is that all the lessons I wrote? So yeah, quality is better than hacks. Also, kind of while we're all here, I'll just put out like if you want to, if anyone wants to ask some of these questions, um, or just join a group of other consultants. I also do have this community that I've put out together. A good portion of it's free. Like I think I have a paid section, or I know I have a paid section, but a good portion of it's free. Like there's resources and lessons, general chats. Actually, I can just go there here too. We can just show this off. So I've got this community that I've kind of created. Um, so if you want to join, again, these several sections are free resources and lessons, where you can watch everything from past lives that we've had, and we've had conversations with other consultants, get free content such as the 30-day independent day checklist for consultants. I actually put in together like 10 LinkedIn hooks. So I went around and looked for really popular hooks. I should have connected them to the links, but you can kind of see the different hooks and how well they did in terms of like reactions. So you get a good idea of like, hey, if I want to write on LinkedIn, like what does really well? So I like went around and looked for those. I put out a video. This is actually part of my course, but I put out tons of free content here as well, just because I know everyone's at different levels, and if you need a lot of help, but you've already started consulting and you're getting better, you'll reach out for that. But if you want just to know how to start, like know who your target persona is and why you need it, I've got that. That's free. Let's see. Oh yeah, why you shouldn't price hourly, which I kind of referenced earlier. So if you want to kind of come and join a bunch of other consultants, again, there's a ton of other consultants here. We just had a bunch of people join last night, I think. Do consider it. Yeah, we got a good amount of people. So feel free to join in, post. I think it's been a lot of fun thus far, and I'm really hoping it continues to grow. We've got like 400 people that have signed up. I think like 180 people are active per month right now. So I'd love to see more people really join in on that. Um, cool. Does anyone have any more questions? Again, you can keep asking questions. I'm happy to answer them as we kind of go around. If not, we can kind of wrap this up. It wasn't meant to be a long hour-long session. I just want to kind of give you guys the chance to answer questions, answer questions, ask questions about consulting, maybe the challenges you're perceiving, maybe what's holding you back. I love answering them. So if you have any, feel free. If not, you can check out the newsletter, which is just again not the greatest name, but I think the content's good, and we are growing. Oh, and I actually just put out this day in the life article that I'm going to be doing a live on as well, talking about through the day in the life of consulting. So we'll talk through this, and this is kind of my general schedule. And we'll talk through that, and then just some other tips about how to be kind of a really focused consultant. We have a question. Here we go. How do you deal with multiple concurrent clients? Do you let them know you have other clients? I mean, you should have a good idea of how many clients you can take on at one time. I think the big thing is like don't set deliverables to be the same day. That's a big just general tip is if you do have multiple clients, don't hurt yourself. Try to put like a day in between delivering because you're always going to be spending a lot of time focusing on delivering something for that day. You can usually have multiple clients. Like most of my clients, like even full time. Sorry about that. Even full time, like they have their own projects, right? Like if you're working with a VP, they probably have 6 other projects going and you're one of them, right? And so it's kind of the same thing, right? As long as you meet them where they're at time-wise, you should be fine. And you just you just talk with them, make sure they understand that, hey, this is gonna be, this is how often I'll deliver, or make sure there's a clear idea of like what you plan to deliver when. And so as long as you can meet those deliverables, it doesn't matter. I don't think they need to know. I don't think it adds to benefit you to tell them, if you've got other clients or not. Again, as long as you're delivering, I don't think anyone really is going to care. So focus on delivering on time, and you'll be fine. But I guess you did ask how you deal with it. Again, the biggest thing is like just don't try to deliver multiple things at the same day. It's just a recipe for making yourself hate yourself the night before. So yeah, cool. Well, I don't know if anyone has any more questions. Doesn't seem like so. So I will, one, say thank you all for joining. Yep, thanks for joining. Thanks everyone for joining. Hopefully this was good. Hopefully you answered some questions. With that, I will end the stream and I'll see you guys next time. Thanks all. Bye.